Hey, Ben, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm doing well, mate. And yourself?
Good, thank you. How's your week been?
That's
What have you
good.
been up to?
Just the usual, really. I've got nothing extra to share.
Yeah,
Been working on a video as of late. I shot, just a piece for some company. It's not even worth sharing. So I've been doing
nice.
a bit of an edit on that.
I saw a couple of little promos that you put together for your Atmos room.
Yes. Yeah, I've been producing some ads because I thought, why not get myself out there? So I did a series of ads to promote doing music mixes, film mixing. What else did I do? It's like score mixing, up mixing for composers. I've pushed some of them and others not. So like I'm waiting for the right time because I've already got quite a bit going on. But I think with the Dolby Atmos space, I need to, get some mixes out there. And so I thought it was time to do some ads.
Nice.
And I'm actually putting some money into it as well. So yeah.
Excellent. I'm keen to hear if the pushing it with a little bit of money makes an impact.
Yeah, well, I started with promoting practice productions, which is something I've had for a while, but again, never pushed ads for it. I kind of talk about it in some of my videos, but they're just basically the files that I get from filmmakers. And so if you're a budding dialogue editor, sound effects guy, or girl, you can actually download the projects and work on them and have something in a show reel. So this sounds like an ad, but I thought it's something I haven't actually pushed. So, I decided to create a bunch of ads while I was at it because these things take time. So I thought I'll shoot the studio, film me doing a lot of pieces to camera and so we'll see what happens there.
Awesome. Now, I just say my dog is being very vocal this evening. So if you hear some dog-like sounds, she's laying down here and making some little croaky sounds. But
it's all good, mate. I've got a
right. She
dog
wants
here
my
as
attention.
well. So, well, tell her that we're doing a podcast, so she'll have to wait.
We're doing a podcast. You're going to have to wait, girl. We'll be back. We'll be back soon. But I thought it'd be really interesting to chat through your journey and my journey discovering sound and realizing we really enjoy making sounds, working with sounds, listening to sounds. Because I don't think I've ever actually asked you, when did that all start for you and how old were you and what was the point that you realized I'm going to spend an enormous amount of time tinkering and listening, all your time playing with sound. So just give me a bit of a backstory.
I love this idea for a podcast because we've worked together for it's probably a decade now, right? It's been a long time we've been working together and we hang out a bit. And obviously the whole point of this podcast was to get to know each other even more and spend some time together. So I'm totally into this idea of deep diving into our history. And it could be interesting for anyone who wants to be in sound or a composer to kind of hear our stories. Everyone's story to success or lack of success is very different. So, it's definitely a good idea. So, well, let's go right back. So I think let's talk very early days. So you should know this, but I was a drummer. So I actually moved back from Adelaide. So I lived in Adelaide for a year and had to move back as Dad's work and stuff. We moved back to Melbourne. But while I was in Adelaide, got obsessed with drums. And it's funny because even the guy who ended up teaching me for only a couple of months when I think it was year 6, before I moved back to Melbourne, there's a story where my dad said to this guy who was a great drummer, he's like, can you teach my son? I think he's obsessed with drums. And, back then, anytime there was a drum kit around, I'd just go on it and just play a beat because I'd seen other people do it. And so I'm playing simple beats. And he showed this drummer a picture that I drew. It's a bird's eye view of my dream drum kit. So I had this obsession with drawing drum kits from bird's eye view of how I'd perfectly set up my own drum kit. And this teacher pulls out a folder and shows my dad and goes, do you mean like this? And he had the exact same set of drawings where he'd been drawing, what his kits, and so my dad was like, perfect. He's, my son has that kind of obsession that, a drummer should have. And so I had some lessons and this guy was like tall, 6 something, and I was in, 6 foot something and I was in year 6. So every time I get there, you have to lower everything down like a good, 20 centimeters for me to be able to play it. But so I was obsessed with drums, and, through high school, I would have been in like 6 different bands, different types of groups, and just got obsessed with drums. And that then moved into recording. So I had a bunch of mates my age or close to, some that I lived near, and we used to just start recording. So I back in the day, had a really crappy PC, family PC, that I basically made my own. And I used to use Cool Edit Pro. Do you remember Cool Edit Pro? So that was what turned into
I do
Adobe.
remember that, yeah. Adobe Audition, wasn't it?
Adobe Audition. So this is, and I shouldn't admit this, but this is like, I had a hacked version of Cool Edit Pro.
Didn't we all have cracked software?
Yeah, we did.
In the early days.
And we all make up for it by paying for everything now.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I used to record with mates. So we'd just write songs and record them. Sometimes I'd just be using programmed drums, sometimes to record them. But I just loved recording, and it was all music back then for me. So once I got to sort of, late high school, as I said, I was playing in heaps of bands, and at the time just recording heaps of stuff with mates. And it wasn't till I got closer to university, I was writing, I applied for it was a course at RMIT for basically music producers. So if you wrote dance tunes, and it was like taught you production, how to use soft synths and hard synths and all that sort of stuff. And I applied for this course in year 12, or as I was leaving year 12. And so instead of studying English and doing all the things that I should have done, I was making folio, because back then with all the courses I wanted to get into, one was an audiovisual technology course, because at the time I was filming stuff as well. I picked up a camera as well. So I was doing everything, audio, video, filming everything, taking photos. I was just obsessed with sort of anything creative in that sense. And so I went for this course, and funnily enough, so I wrote some tracks. I think some of them were dance tracks. I'd recorded some other stuff, sent it in, and actually got an interview. So I went for an interview at RMIT, and I was the only kid that was straight out of school. Everyone else there was like 25. They were DJs, or they'd done other courses, or all this sort of stuff. And I'm like literally this young kid going in to try and get in this course. And unfortunately, I didn't get in. They said, look, you were so close. And they were like, it's amazing that someone with no other experience, just based off your folio alone, we were keen to have you in this course. But I just missed out because there wasn't enough spots. But they're like, try again next year or whatever.
Yeah.
But in the end, I just went and did an audiovisual technology course, which was probably ended up being a great thing, because that course gave me everything. There was sound recording, video production. It kind of taught you all aspects of sort of film and sound. So I was making short films and that, where I did all the scoring and sound design. So at that age, I was 18, 19. And in that space, I was creating stuff, and, I was doing CGI for my films. I remember I did a film, which I should show you one day. It was called Small Change, and it was just, it's not good, but we had this I think I came up with the idea, but the whole thing was going to be an action film, right? I don't know if I'm going into too much detail, but it was an action film where there was a guy, the boss, talking to an agent across the table, and he was saying these like lines of dialogue that were just so, just nothing, bit obscure. And it all turns out, so this guy, it's got cutscenes. So the boss is talking to him saying, you need to do this and that. And then it cuts to a scene of him running through the city, and you're like, oh, what's happening? And so it's all vague. And at the end, you realize his ticket machine was going to be expired. So the whole scene of him running was just to go pay his ticket machine for his parking. And, what happens is at the end, he flicks a coin, and he's flicking a coin as he's listening to the boss, and he flicks the coin and he catches it and realizes, oh crap, I haven't paid my meter. And so I did this like 3D coin flipping in the air. You got a bird's eye view and the coin flips in slow-mo. And so it's just stuff I was dabbling with and whatever. But I full scored that film, did all the sound design for it.
How did you know how to do that? Was it the course did they teach you how to score? No. Or was it just because you were a musician and you thought, I could just put some music against this? Or did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, but how did you even
Nah.
know where to start?
Well, because again, I was like producing dance tracks. I was recording rock music with mates, but I loved film scores from a young age as well. So I just got some libraries. I don't even know where I got them from, if I paid for them. I think at that time I was using Reason. So do you remember Reason?
Yeah, I used Reason for a bit as well.
Had the thing that I loved about Reason is it had a lot of stuff already in it. So it had drum machines and stuff. So it would have had some sort of basic library of strings and stuff. So I kind of did this, which I still love to create, this kind of amalgamation of rock, heavy rock, orchestral, whatever. But back then that course gave us the essentials of how to film a TV show, how to do like news. It was literally teaching you how to be like an AV technician for a university. So they'd teach you how to set up projectors, set up a PA, basic recording. But what I was doing was way like high levels of what they were teaching us. It was very much the bare bones. But yeah, as I said, like back then I just was so obsessed with film scores and even then because I had every aspect of editing the film, I was in a team, but I got to then score it and edit it a certain way that the score would fit with the film. And so I guess from probably more like that was uni and stuff, that's where I got obsessed. So yeah, I don't know. I loved all aspects there, including now. So I still take photos, I still film, I still do some scoring. Particularly later in my career, I did a lot of that stuff as well as audio post-production. I just loved every aspect of it. And that's why I think I'm jack of all trades is I don't like just being good at one thing and I get obsessed with stuff. Even like the computer graphics, like even since then I've done different projects where I've created my own animation stuff, whether it's background visuals for live concerts or, you know, computer graphics for a film or whatever. I just have always loved dabbling in every aspect. And I kind of, I like knowing at a high level each different aspect, even if I'm not, you know, in that one thing. I want to understand it enough that if I talk to someone else about it, I have some base knowledge of it as well. So yeah. Was that too deep or?
No. I want to go deeper. So before we get to like current projects and stuff that you've been doing lately, jump back to when you were sort of coming out of high school, even in high school. Were you friends with filmmakers? Were you in a posse or like, it sounds like you were doing a lot of hats, like you were filming, you were writing music, you were editing it. Was it you and a bunch of mates who were all into it or were you like the lone wolf that wanted to create stuff?
I think I was mostly lone wolf. When it comes to music and say even recording and stuff, I had some friends that were musicians, maybe not so much. I did a lot of the recording side of things, but I at least had muso mates that we'd create tracks or write tracks together and record. When it comes to film, like I did a film course in year 11 and 12, I think it was. We were using like those Macs. Remember there was a monitor. It was like what the iMac back in the day when it was a CRT screen and it had the bright color on the back. Do you remember that one? What
color was your one?
It was a school's computer. I think they went with white or whatever. They probably didn't get bright colors, but we were using DV tape back then. So we'd be recording on the little DV tapes and you have to ingest it in or record it into the computer. So I did some basic sort of film stuff like that at school, but you know, I think my dad loved photography. He was the kind of annoying dad that when you went on a holiday, he'd be like, you know, all right, let's take a family photo, and he'd do like 20 photos because either, you know, he's had a manual camera like they did back then and keep adjusting it. And we'd be like, hurry up, Dad, you know, and then I'd pick up his camera. I got obsessed with that. And then, you know, we had a family video camera that, you know, I used to just film videos with the family. And like most kids, you see Star Wars again and you're like, oh, maybe I'll make a video of me with a lightsaber or I don't know. Like I just was always dabbling in those things. On my own, but with most things in my career, I'm pretty self-taught. At least, you know, these days with YouTube, I consume a lot of knowledge from other people, but formal training, like even when people say, you know, where'd you go to uni or what did you study? I'm like, I studied audiovisual technology, but it was kind of irrelevant to all the things that I do and can do. It gave me some like I make a joke that the one thing I took from university was lefty loosey, righty tighty. That was the only thing that I remember taking from university. But it's probably not fair. As in, it definitely.
You probably learnt a lot more than you could just put your finger on it now.
Yeah, for sure. There was probably essential basics in, when it comes to sound recording or, even the multicam productions and stuff. I definitely learnt how to be in a team, how to direct a team. There was 100% things that I learnt. But even like one of the courses in that was web development. And it was interesting because they literally gave you kind of all the bits and pieces. So I was like, here, you could, if you start your own AV business, you can learn to build your own website to sell your business. And everyone else is doing the most basic HTML website. And I was doing a Flash animated website that did all this stuff. Because I was obsessed with learning stuff. So I went and just, I don't even know how. I think I was doing using Flash to make animations. And I was like, oh, I know how to work this into a website. Or just back then, YouTube must have been something, or I was learning it from somewhere. But
Googling stuff, yeah.
Yeah, Googling things. And I'm not saying all the time I was above everyone else, but like even when it comes to the recording one, there's some people there that didn't know the absolute basics of like gain, stage and EQ, where I'd been recording in my home, on my PC for years at that point. So
talk me through your home setup.
Things.
So like,
oh mate.
Obviously when you first start, you don't have that much, you might have a mic or two, you might have a small interface, but give me like the first, what you started with and like the first few little upgrades. Like take me on that little journey of equipment.
Yeah, I think back then I was probably even using what's the PC sound cards that are great for gaming and stuff. I swear I was using just the internal sound card on the computer and plugging things like, you remember those pods, who made those guitar pods? They were in the shape of a guitar, line 6. So we were using like the line 6 and I was probably just going straight into the line in, just using headphones. I don't even remember. Like it would have been bare bones, like just probably even the PC speakers. Like it was real rough. And that was, early on. I could not tell you what my first interface was. I remember back in the day with like a band that later on I did a bunch of stuff with, we had the KRKs, the original yellow coned KRKs, and they were awful.
I had a set of those as well.
They were disgusting. Like I think these days the KRKs are a bit better, like as in the usable. Like I've got some mates who have some of the second generation, the really small ones, and they sound massive for their size, but these were awful. No low end, real mid-rangey, but not nice. I had to mix in spite of them. I knew that they were awful. But yeah, I couldn't tell you. Like even back then, when it comes to mics and stuff, I remember buying some, like modded stuff because, budget was always an issue back in the day. But I've never really been huge on buying gear. Like I've just never. I had a good drum kit. And I was more into the software side of things. I used Reason for years writing stuff. Like I did a dance album, probably while I was at uni, I did a dance album that I had it on iTunes and stuff for years and then took it down because it was costing me money. But I did a dance album because I was going to see DJs. We can get to the band thing I was in later, but I had some mates who were into DJs and stuff, and I'd go clubbing with them and see international DJs. And I was like, I could do this. So I just, over a summer, for some reason, I think I was flying a lot for work and I just decided to do a dance album. So I was sitting in airports with Reason on a laptop writing dance tunes. And I remember a mate he was also dabbling. He's like, he listened to my album. He's like, this sounds great. He's like, what'd you make it in? I said, Reason. He goes, Reason? And he thought the fact that I pulled some half decent sounds out of that, he thought was good, but the thing for me with Reason originally, as I said, it had soft synths and stuff, but eventually they added recording functionality into it. So, it became my door of choice for a long time there. But But yeah, I just never spent money on gear. It was just pull whatever I could together to make it work. And I'm sure everything sounded awful back then, like the mixes wouldn't translate well and everything probably had noise in it because I was just using the internal sound card and stuff. But I had fun and I learned a lot. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You learn a lot from not just having great gear. You learn to make things sound great because you have to, rather than just having great gear from the get-go and just things are easier. So I think a big part of it for me is I've got very much a problem-solving mindset. Like even if you came to me and said something's wrong with whatever, a toaster, computer, I don't know, home theater, whatever, your alarm system.
You've just given away your routine. You just make toast and work on a computer.
Yeah, that's it.
Is your daily routine there?
That's it. But if you came to me with a problem and said this thing doesn't work, even if I've never looked at that thing before, I'll find a way. I have this like, we're here, we want to be here, and I work my way there, whether the troubleshooting problems. And I think a lot of that probably came from just, well, how can I record on this crappy PC, and you find the right software or you get the right piece of kit, even as I said, we're using Line 6 guitars and, how do we like reroute through that to make other things sound good or whatever it is. I've got a problem solving mind like that, even to this day. So, yeah.
Very interesting. I love hearing about how people discover sound and stuff. What do you think in the early days, even like the earliest when you even realized that you liked sound? What age do you think that you discovered that? Whether it was like realizing that you were actually listening to music and you enjoying music, or more so than just, I like this song, but like, wow, those guitars sound really cool, or wow, I really like the snare. How old were you when you really thought about sound?
Oh, that is an interesting question. It would have to be through those years of being a drummer. Like I grew up in the church, and so I was around music a lot. Unfortunately, my dad was a minister for the Salvation Army, and they love brass bands. And I don't particularly love brass bands, but maybe there's something about a big group of players together that made me love an orchestra and kind of love that vibe. But yeah, it's a tough question because I definitely think I've got better ears, or I hear better than a lot of other people. I don't know if that was from just like, even, I would say I was a muso. I don't really say I'm a muso anymore, but I started as a drummer, but my family's very musical, as in if you hear us all sing Happy Birthday or something as a family, there'll be 10 harmonies going on and people singing up and down the octave. Like it sounds like a choir. So I've grown from a musical family, and, I've learnt piano early on, but even now, like a lot of the orchestral arrangements, I couldn't tell you what the chords are. You've worked with me recently, and I don't know. I know the notes on a keyboard, and I could probably work out certain chords, but at the end of the day, I do everything by ear. I know when something sounds like poo.
The way you want
it. So, and I know there's a lot of producers and other writers out there that are the same, where it's just all based off their ear. But I think having that passion, it must have been in my high school days, having that passion of recording myself made me listen to other stuff more intently. Like as a kid growing up, I didn't get my musical knowledge was from my older brother, because my dad, I don't know if it's something when he became a minister, just didn't really listen to as much music anymore. I don't think he was one of those like music's the devil kind of vibes, but it's interesting, when I turned 30, I bought a record player because particularly in my 20s, I was like, I want everything pristinely recorded. If it's something's like old school, I didn't like listening to it. I needed it like, overly produced, clean recordings. And when I cracked 30, I was like, I need to just expand my horizons. So I bought a record player, bought some vinyl, and then, my vinyl collection grew very quickly. And I loved then going back to just like even mono recordings of jazz and other stuff, and just listening to stuff in, raw, and I started appreciating music more. But it's interesting, my dad came over for dinner one night after we'd built the collection. I said, "Oh, why don't you pick something to put on while we have dinner?" And he was flicking through and he's like, going through all these old records, old vinyl, and like just classics. And he's like, "Oh, I used to have this one. I used to have this one. Oh, I haven't listened to this in so long." And I was like, where was my education? To me, my education from my dad was Tina Arena and John Farnham. Nothing against.
Sorry about that.
No. I still think they're amazing artists. Like John Farnham, classic, right?
Yeah, sure.
But that's all he really gave me. My older brother, obviously, then as he became a teenager, I heard better stuff from him. But I was so kind of cut that, my wife had a good education because her dad played her all the classics all through their, growing up, where I legitimately mostly just got John Farnham and Tina Arena. And so I didn't get a great education when it came to music, but I was exposed to a lot of different stuff being a part of church and kind of a musical church. So, I did a lot of different groups. As I said, I was in probably 6 groups as a kid growing up in high school. So I was playing in jazz quartets, in big bands, in stage bands, in rock bands.
As the drummer.
I was doing, as a drummer and doing all those things, and then just loved writing stuff. So even when I said, I was composing that score for this short film we did in uni, at that point I was clearly dabbling in all areas of composing just because I loved it all, So it hasn't really answered your question, that I don't know at what point. Yeah. It clearly just evolved as I became someone who loved recording and playing at the same time. It's interesting, because I mix some stuff as well, live mixing as well as in the studio. And I think I've just always had a good ear for really listening to things in detail. I used to get so annoyed when I was mixing a PA and people would tell me, turn the foldback up, and I'd go up there and listen. They're like, turn whatever instrument up in the foldback. And I'm like, how are you not hearing that? It's literally blowing out the whole room, that one instrument. I'm hearing way too much of it. Why don't you, for me, I'd say focus your hearing. It's all a matter of concentrating on that sound rather than just having it blasting your head that you don't have to concentrate on it, it's just focus your hearing. And I've just always had that. I think just always had that focus when it comes to sound, even to the point where there's bands that I love. So Carnival, who's from Perth, they're a prog rock band. And I don't even particularly love lots of prog rock, but Carnival have always been one of my favorite bands. I could sing you every bit of sound from their album, every instrument, note, percussive thing. I could hum it or sing it with the songs, but I probably still don't know 100% of the lyrics, even though I've listened to their albums a bazillion times, because to me, the vocals is just another instrument. And when vocals are great, sometimes I get into it, but it's just another instrument to me. So I don't focus on the lyrics. I've never been, I kind of have a saying that I don't do words, because anything I've ever done music-wise, whether it's recording or producing, I always just do the music. I never contribute to, maybe I would the melody a bit, but just not lyrically, because I just don't care. To me, it's just a little bit of sprinkling on the song as a whole.
On the music, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, I don't know. Is that enough of me? Do we...
That's really, really interesting. I find it fascinating, the people's musical journeys and sound journeys. I mean, that probably takes us from the early days of you to sort of your early 20s, probably.
Yeah. Well, I think, do we save that for later?
One. I reckon that's a pretty good part one, and maybe we'll come back and maybe you can talk us through what happened in your 20s to set you up for
because the 20s was
it's a big change,
a big decade. Right? Yeah, I feel a lot happened in the 20s.
I mean, I think that happens for everyone. 20s is where you learn who you are and what you want to do.
Yeah.
So, maybe we'll come back. I'd love to hear that journey of you being a drummer and loving audio to becoming a post-production wizard and having a studio and all that sort of stuff, which is we can spend another half an hour talking about that easily, I'm sure. So from here, I think we'll come back and talk about the next decade of your journey.
Sounds good. And we're obviously going to then have to cover yours as well. So
That'd be
this
fun.
is going to be a great, I'd say a 6-parter, because we'll do my 3 decades, because we don't really count up to 10 or whatever. But we'll do 3 decades from me and then 3 decades from you as well.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun.
Yeah. Well, look, this is all about us getting to know each other and for others to get to know us as well. But it's been good. Sorry, I talked your face
Thanks
off.
For sharing.
But I guess
that was the point.
that was the point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I learned a lot, and I'm really excited to hear the next segment.
Yeah, sweet, mate.
Awesome, man. All right, well, have a good week.
You too.
Catch you soon.